It is time. Time for the fiercest of webcomic competitions. Time for one webcomic to rise above the rest and prove themselves the best. Just kidding. Screen Tone's most ridiculous bracket competition is back. Get ready for the 2025 Screen Tonies, hosted by me, Miranda, one of the hosts here at Screen Tones. Join the Screen Tones community on Discord for a competition of arbitrary requirements and silly specifications. Submissions are open now, and the competition begins in March. For more information, join the Discord community. This competition is no indication of how good a webcomic is. It is purely for fun and for a look at webcomics through goofy glasses. Serious applicants need not apply.
Just do it! Don't let your dreams be dreams. Yesterday said tomorrow. So just do it! Make your dreams untrue!
Hello and welcome to Screen Tones, where we talk anything and everything webcomics. Today we're going to be talking about update schedules. I'm Crispy, I use she, they pronouns, and I make the comics Ghost Young Sickness and Lunar Blight.
I'm Star, my pronouns are she, her, and I make the webcomic Cast Off.
And I'm Delphina, I use she, her pronouns, and I make the webcomic Somnambulous.
So, many webcomics work in a serialized fashion, updating with a page a week or batch of pages every so often, and this is something we probably borrowed from newspaper comics and issue format comics. With that, we want to talk about what it's like to keep up with our own schedules, expectations with retaining that readership, and the process involved with sticking with something that actually works for you. It's going to be kind of all over the place with that because we're unique in your creation. I'm going to dive right into the first question. So, Star, tell me about this. What's the process for figuring out your update schedule? Like, how did you come to where you are now updating your webcomic?
So the entire process is not going to just involve Cast Off. It's also going to involve my previous webcomic, Psy, because Psy was like the weird experimentation webcomic where I was just kind of doing whatever felt right in the moment and then figuring it out and falling on my face and getting back up and being like, okay, that didn't work. Let's try something else. And so by the time I started Cast Off, I kind of already had it figured out. With my very first webcomic, my first update schedule was you get the pages when I do them. And so I would sometimes do 3 pages like back to back, and then I'd go a month without updating. And that's like what happened with my first chapter is I just over 3 months posted 16 pages, but there was like a 2-month gap in between two. Like I uploaded a bunch of pages right at the beginning, and it took like 2 months that I didn't post anything. And then I was like, I want to finish this first chapter before I start college. And so then I busted out 7 pages in like a week. And I was like, ah!
We die like men.
We die like
So
men.
much.
And so I kind of did that for like my first couple of chapters. And then I started getting comments from my very small readership of like 10 people being like, hey, when do you actually update? Because it seems very sporadic. And I was like, haha, you see, it is sporadic. And so eventually, I got enough comments of people suggesting is like, I wish that there was like a regular update schedule for this so I'd know when to check for pages. And I was like, oh, the people have made a request of me. I can see how this works. And so then what I shifted into for the last year or so of doing that comic was I would update every Saturday. And what that meant was on Saturday, I would wake up bright and early, I would sit down, I would draw an entire comic page start to finish, and when it was done, I would post it on DeviantArt, and I would go about the rest of my evening, because this usually took me like 5 or 6 hours. And that was just my update schedule. For like a year I did this, because at the school I was going to at the time, I was going to SCAD, and we have Fridays off. We don't have classes on Fridays, so those are our studio days. And so usually I would do the bulk of my work on Friday, and then Saturday I would usually have like either a club meeting or something, and I would bring my little laptop and my gigantic Intuos tablet to the Pokemon Club meetings, and I would just sit in a corner and draw. And I would, take 5 or 6 hours and draw an entire comic page in one sitting, and then I would post it to DeviantArt, and then I'd still have all day Sunday to do whatever I wanted. No buffer, we die like men. And so, that worked. It was not great, but it worked. And then a few years later, when I started Cast Off, I was like, I've heard tale of this thing called a buffer. And that seems really interesting and enchanting to me. Imagine being able to, oh no, because that's what happened, is I got in a car accident.
What?
Oh no!
I forgot about this chunk of the lore. So while I was in college, while I was doing that comic, I was, posting pages every Saturday just as I finished them. And then at one point, I got into a really bad car accident and I broke my wrist.
Oh my gosh.
And then I was like, oh man, I can't really make pages right now. Maybe I should be making pages ahead of time.
Like, Star, the fact that that's what you thought of, like, oh, real bummer. I can't make pages.
No, listen, this is the most on-brand shit for me.
Yeah.
Because, like, I was also uploading the comic pages to Facebook because this was in, like, 2012. And so a lot of my college friends would read the comic pages because I was uploading them to Facebook. And I had so many friends give me grief because, yes, I was in a car accident and I broke my wrist, but I didn't break the drawing wrist. I broke the other one. And so I was back to, and I heard from several friends who were not like super close, but they knew me and they would see me occasionally. I heard from several friends who saw my update that I was in a car accident and broke my wrist. And they were like, oh my God, I hope Star's okay. I don't know when I'm going to see her next. And then they see me updating my comic 2 weeks later and they're like, oh, she's fine.
Oh my God.
I am not exaggerating. This is 100% true. Because what I did, sorry, brief tangent, I had a cast on my left hand, and that's how I do all my keyboard shortcuts. And I was like, well, this is going to be very difficult and less efficient if I can't use my keyboard shortcuts. So I shoved a knitting needle into the wrist of my cast, and I used the blunt end of the knitting needle to poke my keyboard.
Oh my God.
Please, I need this drawn. Okay.
Oh, I think I did draw it and post it somewhere at some point in like a DeviantArt journal entry or something.
Okay, stupid question.
Real, yes.
Stupid question for you.
Okay.
Because you had to work with a cast, did that inspire Cast Off?
Oh my God.
It didn't, but people have asked me that.
Oh my God.
That was like 4 or 5 years before I started Cast Off. I think, because the car accident was my junior year of college, and then I started Cast Off like 3 years later, I believe. So, but yeah, and so I was like, wow, I really wish I could still be uploading my comic despite the fact that I have been near mortally wounded. I was like, maybe, perhaps, perchance, making comic pages ahead of time would be nice, and then like posting them on a regular schedule. And so then a few years later, when I started Cast Off, I took that in mind. But the update schedule for Cast Off, it's like, so Cast Off updates every Monday and Friday. And the reason for that is real boring. It's because when I first started the comic, Monday and Friday were the days that I worked from home.
Okay.
And so if anything went wrong with the upload, or I noticed a typo or anything in the page, or like I got a comment notice is like, hey, this is an inconsistency, I could be like, beans. And I would really be able to like just jump over to my personal laptop and just fix it on company time in like 5 minutes and then go back to what I was doing. And then even though I'm not working that job anymore, it works. And so I just never changed it. People are used to it now, so yay.
Yeah. It's interesting because like when I think of like the Friday and Monday thing, that's schedules that we use also for Ghost Junk. And I always find it's like the beginning of the work day or the work week, I guess. I always find that's where they get the most readers because they're just bored, because Mondays are usually like the slow days. And then Friday is like, I want to go because it's the weekend. And I don't know. Mondays are definitely like the most as far as readership is concerned.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of comments from people saying the cast off is the best part of their Monday. And they look
Yeah.
forward to Mondays because their comic is going to update. And I'm like, aw.
Yeah, I definitely see like that sentiment floating around with like, folks really enjoying that Monday update. So that's definitely something that drives me for that as well. I'm gonna poke you, Delphi. Tell us about your amazing journey figuring out your update schedule, and I really hope that it didn't include an accident.
No, nothing
What's
so
your deep
exciting.
lore?
Okay. Well, when I first started drawing comics, they weren't actually web comics because the internet didn't exist because I'm old. So it was like in high school, I had a sketchbook and I would draw during history class and I would draw panels and stuff. And then my readership was my friends who would take my sketchbook and pass it around at lunchtime. And so sometimes those updates were like a page and sometimes they were like a panel because that was that was what I could draw during history class.
Mhm.
So that was like I not your typical schedule sort of thing, but it kind of got me to the idea of like, oh, well, I have the small readership who wants to see updates on a regular basis and I have to get them to them as fast as possible. And so that was, and I think a lot of us start with that impulse to just kind of like, okay, I did the page. I'm going to post it. I can't wait. I'm very
Yep.
excited. And so that is sustainable until you get into a car accident or something. Um, so, um, so yeah, I wanted to try to come up with something a little more planned. I think a lot of the problem too with posting things as soon as you're done with the page is that if you have some other ideas further down the line where you're like, oh, I want to take that back because I figured out a better way to do this that connects with the next page. You
Mhm.
can't really do that if you're posting from page to page. So I was working with NaNoMongo, which was the national, like, it's like NaNoWriMo, but we made it into manga because we're nerds on LiveJournal. And so
Mhm.
I was into this little group that was doing these every November, try to do 30 pages in 30 days. Ridiculous.
Mhm.
And I was just trying to like get as much stuff as I done, just get a chunk of it done. And what I found was that it did help me to some capacity to figure out, okay, what is, in my typical month, how many pages can I do when I'm like really gunning for it, like full speed, concentrating on nothing else. And some weeks it was more and some weeks it was less, but the average was kind of like 3 or 2. And so that's kind of what helped me when I was ready to make it a actual web comic. When I was ready to start posting pages online, I'm like, okay, I know from my experience that like 2 pages a week is pretty comfortable for me.
Mhm.
um and a lot of the comics I was reading at the time updated on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So I thought I was going to be cute and different and do Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I was very proud of like having one of the only comics that updated on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so you'd have something to read. But yeah, I don't get the Monday people, but it's worked out pretty well. There's been a couple times when, later on down the line, I had a little more life stuff happening and I bumped it down to like maybe 1 page a week. Recently I decided maybe the last update of the month, because like 8 pages a month, that's pretty darn good for a
Yeah.
lot of comics. So maybe the last update of the month, I'm going to skip that one and do like a little life update so I could talk about things on my Patreon, or I could talk about my Kickstarters or anything else, or just share sketches, just have that kind of free space. And that seemed to work out for me and gave me a little bit of
Mhm.
a break. Like it's planned and it's a planned like rest day, and it's also something like that I can use as kind of a wild card when I have other things going on. So that's the update schedule I'm doing now. might adjust a little more that I have a busier job at this point, but we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important to like gauge with like what works with you as like creators too. And I think like the three of us in this conversation are really like we're obsessed with comics, guys. Like we really like comics. So
Really?
I think it's
What?
it comes to show like or it goes to show like, you know, having like an accident and just being like, guys, I still got to get this comic out cuz it's possessing me, and figuring out like doing the 30 pages a month kind of thing as a challenge, that really shapes yourself as a creator. And it's funny, Delphi, you're talking about like doing comics before. It reminded me of the old days. I actually used to run, so I'm assuming you guys know of like Captain Underpants.
Oh, yeah.
And the characters in there had their own fan comics of Captain Underpants, and they would staple it and send it around the school. So of course, I used to read Captain Underpants, and I love Kirby, still do. And me and my friend had our own comics of Kirby in which we would draw the whole thing. It would be folded, so I would draw it and fold it, and then I would make a cover, and we'd do it like manga read style too. So not left to right, but right to left, because of course.
Of course.
Yeah. And like I would pass it around. Like we'd have like this comic book bound, and it would pass around like, you know, our class and stuff like that with whoever was interested in reading sassy Kirby stories. I think I do still have one copy. I will try to find it. But anyway, and it's true, like, you know, I was so excited about it, and it was just like I need to just get it out. My standard for the time was a lot of manga, and it still kind of is, which is its own kind of mixed bag. But that fed a lot into how we approached a lot of our other stuff. So as the years go by, like I'm still drawing comics. I never stopped. You know, I did the proto version of Ghost Young Sickness by myself, and very much like Star, it was like, okay, today is going to be a comic day. I'm going to draw the whole thing in one day, and then I'm just going to upload it to DeviantArt. And like that was the process of that. There was just like no man's land. It happened when it did, kind of thing. And then kind of moving forward, we did I started working together specifically with Space, who I work with now, to do the other comics that I do. And we did a fan comic for TF2, and we developed a schedule for that. So we did have a day in which we did upload, and people were like, oh, okay, like, you know, I'm gonna read this silly comic here. And I think that we just got that just because people were like, when can I anticipate it? And like that's important. We'll talk about that in the next question, but the anticipation is something that you kind of want to focus on if you want to retain a lot of that stuff as far as readers is concerned. But anyway, we did that. But then we got to Ghost Junk. We were like, oh, we're going to do our own original thing. We're going to get into this, and it's going to be great. I don't understand our schedule of updates. Luckily, because I have access to Tumblr's like archive system, we can see back in the day. So 2014, when we kind of started, we used to do this thing, and I'm just gonna read it from our update posts, is that we want to keep our updates in one big dump for I love that we said big dump, but anyway, but one big dump for the sake of immersion. But we have decided now that the first 3 Mondays of each month will update one page, and then the rest of the 20 to 30 pages on the 4th Monday. I'm like, what is the schedule?
What does that mean?
What is the logic? That's so confusing.
And I'm looking again, and it's we update. Then we changed our schedule. Get excited for this one. It says we update 1 to 2 pages every Monday until the end of the month. Will we update the rest of the 20 to 30 pages? Like, and we kept up with it. I am very proud of the fact that throughout all of these years, we have never missed a single update of Ghost Young Sickness, like at all. It's always been pre-scheduled. If we run into life problems, it's all there. The buffer always existed. Now, I will say there's 2 of us, so you know, don't feel bad about being like, but buffer is important for a lot of those reasons. Again, we'll talk about that later. But I mean, we eventually figured it out that was a little crazy.
Yeah, a little bit.
And we were going to college at that time. I don't know where the time happened for us to be doing that. We were working college. I don't know. But it happened, and a lot of our standards were the manga thing. We were like, oh, but people get full chapters and they're so immersed. And so a lot of the pacing and everything is attuned to that, which I don't know if I regret or am still kind of in love with. I have no idea, still to this day. Very weird update schedule. We eventually found it out. We figured it out when we were like, oh, there's other people around here and they're not doing weird things like us. That's, To that point, I'm going to ask you, Star. Why do we need schedules at all to update our stuff? Like, what's the benefits for keeping an update schedule, like both for the creator and the reader?
So I think there's definitely benefits for both creator and reader. For readers, like I said, I started maintaining an update schedule because my readers specifically asked me, "Hey, I want to know when I can check back on this comic and know that there will be an update posted." And like I totally get that, It's like a lot of webcomics these days I follow, I just like wait for their social media posts and then I'm like, okay, there you are. But sometimes I end up missing them. And so with a lot of comics, it's really good to, just know inherently is like, oh, it's this day of the week. That means there will be a new update for this thing. And I know that my readers appreciate it because I schedule my comic updates well in advance. And it's gotten to the point where my readers do a countdown on Discord. They do a countdown. They're like, they'll start like posting excitedly like 12 hours before the page goes up. Because I post the new pages at like midnight every Monday and Friday. And they're like, oh my God, you guys, soon. They'll start posting soon gifts in the chat like the Thursday morning. And they'll be like, guys, soon. And then that evolved into being like, soup, and they're like, guys, it's soup time. It's like, we're gonna get a comic soon. And I'm like, y'all do this twice a week, y'all do this. And so it's like it's building hype, especially like right now they've been very gung-ho about it because there's been a lot of like lore and stuff dropped in the comic that's like answering questions that were raised 10 years ago in the comic almost. And so it's like they're finally getting those lore drops. And so people have been very excited, but they know inherently it's on a schedule. It's regular. It is consistent. A new page will be out at this time every single week. And they know. And so I think that they definitely value that. And for me, I also value that because, okay, so here's the thing. You guys might relate to this. Do you ever like look at your to-do list and be like, oh, well, I could just work. It's like, listen, I've already done all of the things I need to do this week, but I have so many more things on my to-do list. I could just do those now and then not worry about them later. And then you work too hard and you burn yourself out.
Yes. Oh my God, yes.
That was me for a long time. When I first started doing like full-time freelance, I kind of had to figure this out because, I update 2 pages a week. And so I would finish my 2 pages a week, but then I'd be like, so no, that's not exactly what happened. So I was testing for a while with like batch doing pages. So I would do like 8 pages at a time. That's like an entire month's worth of cast off updates. And I would sketch them all at the same time. And then I would ink all of them. And then I would color all of them. And I would do this in like a big batch. But that batch would take me like 3 weeks to finish on top of all my other junk that I had to be doing. And so what would happen was I would know that I had a batch of pages that were incomplete. And as long as I had a batch of pages that were incomplete, I was like, I can't work on anything else. I have cast off pages I need to finish. I need to do this. I need to sit down and do this. And so I just like didn't draw for fun for like 2 years.
Yeah.
Because I'd finish my batch and I'd have like 3 days before I'd have to start the next one. And that was really unhealthy. And so now what I do is I still work in batches, but I draw 2 pages a week and then I post 2 pages a week. I'm drawing like pretty far ahead. So like I'll be drawing page 10, but the website is getting page like 2 and 3 that week. And so I'm pretty far ahead, but I'm like, once I have finished my 2 pages I need for this week, I don't have to think about the comic anymore this week.
Yeah.
And so usually Mondays and Tuesdays are my comic days. So like Monday, I'll sketch and probably ink and maybe flat if I have time, depending on how complicated the pages are. And then Tuesday is just like finish doing the coloring, doing all the shading and exporting everything. But then the rest of the week, it's like, okay, you're done with your pages for this week. Your comic workload is done and you don't have to think about the comic again until next Monday. Go do something else.
Yep.
And so that has generally been much better for my mental health because I'm not constantly dealing with this anvil shaped like a webcomic hanging over my head constantly, and just me constantly being freaked out about the anvil that's going to fall on me if I'm not working constantly.
Yeah. No, I totally understand getting sucked into the wormhole of like the work brain. Like, I and it's like when you have like it's there and you're just like I could just do it. Like I could
You
just
just work on it, yeah.
Yeah, I could just work on it. Like we wanted to finish Ghost Junk like this year, and in 2024, I guess I'll just say that. And I inked over like I think it was like 60 some pages in 1 month. And I was like,
oh my god,
I just wanted to get it done. I'm never going to do that again. Just as like, that was a lot. That was a lot. I stayed up till 5 like most nights.
oh
Like,
my god.
don't do that. That's not healthy. But I understand getting lost in the sauce, especially for that. So we need breaks, and we need breaks for ourselves, which is definitely why it's important for the creator and the reader to know. I do want to poke you, Delphi. Like, come on in. The water is fine. Why do we need update schedules, and talk about the benefits and, you know.
Yeah. So, like 20 years ago, I would have said, like, do you need an update schedule for your readers? Absolutely, because they've got little bookmark folders for every day of the week and they're going through them and they're checking them, and you need to make sure something is there because they'll be sad if they do that too many times and they don't see something there.
Yeah.
10 years ago, I would have said, okay, well, there's social media now, and sometimes you'll catch people's updates there. So it's still important, but it's not as important. You could still kind of follow them, and you'll see when they post, and it'll be fine. Today, I don't know.
Oh.
Because social media has kind of exploded. A lot of the platforms that used to be very stable are not so much anymore.
Mhm.
There's a lot of platforms now that are more algorithm based, and things are kind of shuffled around, and people don't see your social media posts sometimes, and they won't know that you're updating because that's the platform's fault, basically. Um, so I think I've come back around to saying, yeah, it's pretty important. It's pretty important for your readers to know that you're updating on this day a week and that day a week. I wouldn't try to make it very complicated. I wouldn't try to say, well, every other day we're posting 5 pages, but then
Yeah.
we're posting the other things. I like a simple day of the week that I can just say, okay, this is my day. I'm gonna go to the thing.
Mhm.
I don't even know that I like daily updates. There's some comics that update daily, and
Yeah.
that
Ugh.
seems like a lot in this day and age to like
Mhm.
check the same site every day.
Yeah.
But there's some people who do it, and depending on the comic style, it might work for you. But I like once or twice a week. I think that's pretty solid. It's respectful of the reader's time, and I feel like just it keeps your story moving. If you're doing a long form story, that it's important for people to know what's going on, because people forget webcomic time is a thing and people don't necessarily remember week to
Mhm.
week what happened. So if you're taking very long breaks or very sporadic schedule things, that might not work out so well. So there is definitely a benefit in keeping your readers engaged, when you have that regular update schedule of once a week, every other week, something like that,
Mhm.
or planning out your chunks if you do chunk sort of things. And I definitely agree about the psychological aspect as a creator. It's just very easy to feel like you're doing too much or you're not doing enough, um, unless you have a kind of objective way of looking at your progress. And one of those ways is your update schedule. You can say, I have posted 2 pages this week. That I have met the requirement. This is an objective thing. So whatever I'm feeling in my brain about not doing enough or doing too much, there is a definite measurement that I can see, okay, I've met my quota or I have not. And now if you're a workaholic, you can kind of take a break, or if you're not if you're not as devoted, or you're feeling like, oh yeah, I'm done, like maybe you need to evaluate that, I guess. But yeah, I feel like there is a lot of benefit for creators, just on that emotional and psychological level, to make sure that you're like, it's just a long game, and
Mm-hmm.
especially when you're doing this so long, it's a little, it's nice to have that regularity, I want to say.
Yeah.
Marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it's interesting. And this is going to be our next question, so I'm just going to kind of preface this a lot. I hang out in the Screen Tones Discord a lot because I am so nosy. I'm so nosy. Like when people are like, I'm going to start my webcomic, or my webcomic is this, or I have some, blah blah blah. Like I like giving feedback and critique and stuff like that. I'm very passionate about that. So I'm just like, I'm so nosy. I'm like a little spider in the corner, and I have my notebook. I don't know. So people always talk about like how many pages, or they usually say how many panels is a good update, and I'm like, that is impossible to just kind of say. Like, as far as like pacing is a huge thing, guys, and we all have different comics and stories and stuff like that. So like you can't just be like, oh yeah, just always aim for 30 or just always aim for 40 or whatever. The minimum kind of thing is that they assume is a minimum. Because one thing that I just want to point out in this episode is that I don't think that there is one way to do anything. These are just ways that like all of us have found out how to kind of have a healthy relationship with our comics, because I think that's like key as far as creating webcomics is concerned, is just being healthy about it and like moving the story forward, because we want the project to be finished and we're having fun doing it. So that's the biggest thing. So when you start to ask those questions like, how many panels should I do? What is a good update? What does a good update look like? It's like, well, what does it look like to you? You are, I'm hoping, reading webcomics as well. And what's something that you enjoyed or aspire to? So always reflect on that and be like, do I see myself doing this? Or, what do I do to make it work for my kind of life schedule? And with that, going after you, Star. What is your advice for someone who is just starting out and trying to figure out like an update schedule? So like, what kind of factors like kind of go into these choices, and are things that you should avoid? Like, let's talk about it.
Yeah, so I mean, I was musing about this with my stream viewers a few weeks ago, in that it's easy to give advice, it's hard to give specific advice. Because
Yes.
everybody's so different and everyone's circumstances are so different, right? And so honestly, I feel like the best way for people to figure out what their own update schedule should be is to just try a couple of different things. When you're first starting out, like your very first comic, it's going to be like that first pancake. It's not going to be perfect. It might be a little bit messy, but it's still it's all about the learning experience, right?
Yeah.
You stumble, you fall, you learn how to get back up, and then you just keep going. And that's how all of us have learned how to do this, is a lot of stumbling and a lot of falling, and then getting up and being like, okay, there's a rock in the road there. Don't step on that, because you'll fall over again. And so honestly, I think my best advice for figuring out an update schedule, one, figure out how much you can commit to each. And so what my advice has been for a couple years is take just like a week and work on the comic just whenever you have time. Just like take an entire week and just like focus on just the comic in all of your free time. And I promise this is going to go somewhere. It's not going to be an unhealthy thing, but it's just like work is like, what is your maximum output? Look at your maximum output, subtract one page from it. That's a good standard, I think, generally. So it's like me, I can do 3 pages a week if I have to, but I don't want to be working at maximum output constantly,
Yeah.
because that's how you get burnout. And so you take that maximum output and you subtract like 50 to like 30 to 50% from it. And then that's how much you can commit to on a regular basis every week, generally. If I have to, I can make 3 pages a week. 2 pages a week is far more doable, so that's what I stick with. Back when I was first starting and drawing my pages took me a lot longer because I was just slower in general. A page would take me like 12 hours. And so I only updated once a week because that's all I could do. That's all I had time for. For me, it's just like figure out how much you can commit to each week, but don't like constantly be stressing yourself out. Don't keep yourself at maximum output at all times, because
Yep.
that is how you burn out and start hating comics, and that's not what you want to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then also it's just like, just test out a couple of different things. Like if you're going for more of like a webtoon style format and you're doing like number of panels per week, which I don't know, maybe this is my boomer moment, but I could never wrap my head around it because I've never formatted pages like that, because I'm always thinking about like comics for print and stuff. But just like test it out, see what you can do, see what you can commit to, try a couple different things, see what you like best, see what your audience appreciates more, and just don't be afraid to experiment and have like just get your fingers dirty a little bit, just kind of like dig around, see what you can figure out. It's like, don't be afraid to experiment.
Yeah.
You know? And it's just like, I feel like a lot of people are scared to experiment, but just like, don't be. You're not officially like published or anything. There's no one holding you to a certain amount. It's just finding what works for you is very important, but the only way you're going to find that is by testing the waters and testing a bunch of different things until you settle on what you are good with. Because like my first webcomic I did for 3 years, that whole cycle that I said where it's like I uploaded a bunch of pages at once and then I slowly shifted into an update schedule, and then that took 3 years to figure out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's how long I did my first comic for. And so it's like, don't be afraid to just like look at something that's not working and figure out how to fix it.
Yeah.
You don't have to have all this perfectly figured out when you first start.
Yeah, like a lot of folks are like afraid of that failure, that people are really looking at them, and I get it. Like especially in this time of era, social media has a lot of eyeballs on people, and like but you guys also don't realize that like social media is presenting a lot of the wins on people. Like we're not seeing the failures of like what happens behind the scenes. It's something you really need to reflect on when creating a lot of this stuff. And like I always say, like, there's a lot of folks that kind of look over their shoulders at other people's homework and be like, well, I got to do it like that. I got to do it like that. It's like, you don't, because you're going to be drawing different. Your output is going to be different from the person over there. You can get inspired by how they're doing it, what they're doing. Talk about their process. That is very important. Get nosy about how they do it. And because like Star mentioned, like it took her 3 years to figure that out. And it is a process. You're not going to be like, okay, I'm going to start my webcomic, bam, and then everything just falls into place. Like, I know people get stuck in pre-production hell because they're afraid to just see what it's like to have that schedule in there. But you do just have to go in and be like, what's the actual week look like? Like, what does it look like when I'm actually making comics?
Yeah,
Very
I
much,
think
yeah.
that's important to like try to figure out, okay, here's the ideal. Like here's
Yeah.
what I look like, but also I feel like there's a lot of emphasis placed on the launch, right?
Yes.
Whenever I talk to anybody who's thinking about starting a comic, they're like, I want to do a big launch. I want to have everything figured out. I want to have my ducks in a row. I want to look professional. I felt like that too. It was just very much like, oh gosh, it's got to be good from the very first page or else things will be bad. And that is so not the case with comics. Like web comics are super forgiving. Like a lot of times people won't be hooked from page 1 or page 2. It's going to take them 50 pages. It's going to take them 100 pages. Like you got time. You've got so much time to figure things out. So absolutely, I 100% agree with Star. Just figure things out. Don't be afraid of looking a little goofy about like, you know what? I tried. updating 4 days a week, and that was not the right call. So this month we're going to try something else. And nobody's looking at you or pointing and laughing and saying, oh my gosh, you didn't know that you couldn't update 4 times a week. Like, no, it's fine. And like, you're going to keep making pages. You're going to have more readers coming in who never even saw that weird like transitional phase. So like, don't be afraid of it. It's perfectly necessary. We've all done it, and just don't shy away from that, because I think that part's kind of fun too.
Yeah, that's just the thing. Like the delicious part, I'm using delicious here, about webcomics is the fact that we are our own masters and we can do whatever we want, like update wise, story wise, upload wise. We have a great resource on the Screen Tones blog on Tumblr that has like an awesome list of breakdowns of where to post your webcomic, and there's a lot of options. There are so many options that, I think a lot of folks don't realize. So, we do have a lot of freedom there. And why should you kind of chain yourself to expectations kind of enforced in your own standards, like when reflecting on like webtoons or anything like that? Because like, I know that's a big part of the conversation. When I talk to like younger creators, they're like, well, I have to be producing the amount of panels that like original series that get paid to do. And I'm like, please don't. Please stop. Please don't. That's it.
I don't even think they should be doing that, but that's my own personal opinion.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. That it's just, again, I think our biggest underline in this episode is avoiding burnout. Being sustainable, I think, is just, that's key to me. I do, this is just a personal brag about like, never missing an update for Ghost Junk Sickness, just because we were like, we want to be on the ball with our life kind of things, the potential happenings in our life. And boy, oh boy, did a lot of things happen in 2024. And just doing a lot of things for our own kind of peace of mind too. That helps prevent burnout. It makes the story go forward in a way that like, we can keep up with the momentum. But like, our journey is not going to be the same as somebody else either. Like, don't look at that and be like, oh, well, I should be doing that, because no, it's just not going to work for everybody. Not to mention that like everybody has different stories, genres, characters, and stuff like that. Everything's just not going to translate one-to-one with what you even receive too, as far as like readership and retention or anything like that. So I think the biggest thing that I want folks to walk away with when listening to this episode is just that sustainability for themselves as a creator. That's my biggest point.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's nothing wrong with like under promising and over delivering, right? Like if you find out that like, oh, I'm doing 1 page a week, but like now I've got all this buffer and like, geez, like this is wild. I mean, you can like upgrade that at any time to say, hey, guess what, we're doing 2 pages a week now, and that would be great. But also you could just hang on to it. You could hoard it like a little dragon, and you could say like, you know what, I'm saving this because I don't know if I get a different job or I have some family emergencies or anything like that can throw you off, and you might not draw for like the next month or something like that. So I know a lot of us like to feel like, well, I can do it. I can do that no matter what. And like, can you though? Can you do it for 5 years? Can you do it for 10 years? Because that's the kind of commitment you're typically looking at for webcomics. So you know what? I think you need to give yourself a little bit of leeway here.
What happens if you get hit by a truck?
Exactly. And then you're transported to another world, and then you don't have your supplies.
But you know what? Your comic can keep updating. And that's the important thing.
There's an anime somewhere in here where you can only come back to you're reincarnated into your webcomic because you got hit by Truck Coon.
Oh man, I wish that's what happened. No, I just got a broken wrist and a bunch of chipped teeth. That shit sucked.
Unglamorous truck. Please transport me to Fun World.
I got a friend to make me a button that I pinned to my cast and said, "You should see the other guy."
Oh my gosh.
other guy is my webcomic
Yeah.
that I am drawing with a
Shit out of
crochet
him.
needle.
Yeah. It pushes up glasses. Crochet is with hooks. These were knitting needles.
I apologize.
This was during my knitting arc where I learned how to knit squares and rectangles and then stopped.
But it came in handy for the webcomic. So,
Yeah.
redemption
Couldn't
arc.
use my fingies, and so I literally just shoved a knitting needle into, because like the ends of the knitting needle are like wider, and they have like a little, like a dot or like a bead of wood on the end, and so it's basically a finger, and so you just like shove it into your wrist and you just go to do your keyboard shortcuts. Because also another thing was, I was not just doing this in the privacy of my own home, I had to do this during art school animation classes.
Oh,
Because I had an animation final due. This happened right before midterms. And you can't operate Maya unless you can do like keyboard shortcuts with your other hand. And so I had a system.
I need this drawing. You need to find it. Go into your DeviantArt.
I have been searching. I think it was on my Facebook. They got hacked and deleted a few months ago.
Well, we need a new drawing now.
I know. It's like, I know I did art of this somewhere, and I may have posted it on Tumblr, but it was on my old blog that I deleted a while back because it was cringe. And so I was like, damn it, this might have been one of the posts I didn't archive. Shit.
Oh, we'll get it. We'll get it. It'll come back.
I'll go digging through my old files just for y'all.
I would appreciate that. I feel like I'm gonna make that the thumb of this episode too.
Oh golly.
Well, honestly, I feel invigorated to work on my webcomic with my update schedule now. With Lunar Blight, I will mention we're only doing 1 page a week because the pages are so detailed. I ink it all traditionally, so it takes me such a long time to do any of that. So I do all the spot blacks and I'm just like painting it, and I'm just like, there is a fill tool on digital art, but man, is this relaxing.
You gotta get in the zone.
Exactly.
That's valid.
Gotta have fun with making webcomics. And with that, I think that is a Chicken Salad Caesar wrap with this episode. I've been your host, Crispy. And you can find my webcomics at ghostyoungsickness.com and lunarblight.com.
I've been Star the whole time. And you can find my comic at castoff-comic.com.
And I've been Delphina, also the whole time. And you can find my webcomic Sombulus at sombulus.com.
Heck yes. Time to go get some webcomics updated.
Well, mine's on hiatus right now.
Oh.
Thank you for listening to Screen Tones, a webcomic podcast. You can find all our episodes at screentonescast.com. We've got a couple links over there to our Ko-fi and merch shop, where your support will help us create more episodes and keep us talking about anything and everything webcomics. You can also find us on YouTube, Blue Sky, Tumblr, and our Discord server. Thank you so much for listening, sharing, rating, and supporting, and we'll see you next time.